Hey.
Hey, John.
What's going on, Moritz?
Good to have you.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of an idea. What's your background? How did you arrive in aquaculture?
Yeah. So I would say I stumbled into it. It was definitely more of a random occurrence to come into the aquaculture industry. I originally studied computer science, and this was back in 2014 that I graduated. And at the time, we were working down in Washington, D.C. And just south of D.C. is this river, the Chesapeake. And there's quite a bit of oyster farms there, but we didn't really know this. One day we're coming home, and I saw a restaurant on the water. We decided to stop, and I asked the waiter, can we go out and go tour the farm? And it was kind of a joke, but he pointed to the guys at the dock. He said, yeah, go ask them, and they'll take you out on the boat. And that was the day we fell in love with the industry. So took us on the boat, and they showed us how they farm oysters and how they tumble them and kind of the whole process. And me and my co-founder Tony, we were two software engineers at the time, so we were like, how can we help you? What can we do to be involved here? And we ended up building them this ERP software, just something to manage their inventory with the end goal of predicting red tide, because that's the algal bloom that really wipes out a lot of the oysters in that portion of the States. That was kind of the whole thing we did for almost 2 years. And then after 2 years, we wanted to go full time and actually do it for real, and ended up with a very short trip to Norway. And I think it was 2 weeks after that trip, I quit my job and I was relocating across the Atlantic to where I am still today in Norway. So, yeah.
And that's around the time also, I think, we met.
Yep.
Because you were in Norway for about a year at that point.
Yep.
You were part of the first Hatch cohort.
Correct. Yeah.
And I joined Hatch December 2018. January 2019, we met, or January, February, we met in the Bergen office.
Yeah.
Back then, I think, it's it's 6 years now that have passed since then. Manolin, your company that you still run with Tony.
Yeah.
From that point in 2018-19 to today, what's been the arc? Like, what did you set out to achieve? What of that have you achieved, and what's on the horizon now?
I think, like many people who first time starting a business, the arc has been bumpy, but a lot of fun along the way. I think when we originally set out, we had this idea that it was a 5-year timeline. And in 5 years, everything would be running super smooth and be profitable and everything would be great. But the reality is we spent 5 years, I would say, almost messing up, where we learned a ton. So the goal was always to collect as much data as we could. And we had this kind of idea in our head of 20% of the industry was enough to do the analytics that we were trying to do. We exceeded that in the first 3 years. And then what happened was we just kind of kept focusing on collecting data until we got to a point of where something snapped in our head. We were almost forced to change our mentality and start turning on the burners, as they say. So how do you utilize this information to not only distill cool, unique insights, but turn it into an actual business? So I'd say over the last 3 years, this changed quite substantially, where we have amassed more than enough data to do these really in-depth and cool analytics to predict specific diseases, understand what inputs or actions help the farms in the long term. So a lot has changed since way back when we first met in 2018. So, yeah.
Give me a bit more around that. So what does Manolin actually do and provide in detail to the farms?
Yeah, so we're considered a risk intelligence company. That's what we consider ourselves. And why I say that instead of like a SaaS or a software application is we have an app. The farms come in, they can visualize the data and the analytics in the application, but really what we do is we're this analytical engine, if we can say that, where we aggregate all of this data that the farms give us. So the sensor information, whether that's oxygen or salinity, sea temperature, their camera systems that are collecting lice data or swim speed or tilt, their lab tests, PCR, histology. All of this data is being aggregated into our system, and then we parse it, we clean it, we normalize it, and we enrich it with additional information. And then on the tail end of it, what happens is all of that information, this very large data pool, we're able to create these massive generalized insights. So like ChatGPT, but specifically for farm data. And what it does is it allows for the farms to get predictions on what specific diseases, what their growth rates may be, what parasites might look like in n number of weeks, and then it allows for them to understand, if I were to deploy X treatment or X type of feed or use this vaccine, what is that going to look like 30 days, 60 days, my entire production cycle after the fact. So it's more of an analytic engine, but they can access it from both an API and from an application itself.
So basically it relies on the farm technologizing itself, really, and then there's a certain snowball effect, if I understand that correctly.
Exactly. And it can start with something very simple. So if the farmers are simply collecting data in Excel, we can digitize those records, right? If they're writing them on hand, we can digitize them. It's a little more painful, but it's still very possible. As more sensors, more complicated things come into play, then the analytics begin to grow and grow and grow along with them. So it's kind of a self-feeding system in a sense, right? You benefit from the more that you throw into it, versus I think more traditionally where when you're purchasing a product, they're kind of all standalone things that are happening, parallel to each other, but there's not a lot of talking between them. So we tried to set out to solve that problem.
I heard some people call you a big data company for aquaculture. Do you think aquaculture data has reached that size that you can call it big data?
Big data is quite contentious. I think it depends on who you talk to. If you're talking to the statistician, they say big data is only data that grows exponentially. And there might be an argument that we're starting to hit that threshold, especially as more of these sensors and cameras where they're it's minute by minute, second by second information that's being fed. So I'd say we're getting close if we are not there just yet. But from a data size, I think we have a big data pool. And maybe that's more how people look at us is when they say big data, is that there's so much information that we've accrued. But we are collecting minute by minute data at this point from some of our farms, so it's definitely getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've had some very interesting developments in the last 2 years in the field of especially AI. Seems news to many. It's the field in itself. For you're a computer scientist, so you've been aware of machine learning techniques and neural networks for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
However, we've seen substantial breakthroughs now. And I'd say especially on the user experience and user interface to reason with some of these models and utilize some of these models, we've seen substantial breakthroughs.
Yeah.
How has that changed the game for you, and has it?
It definitely has. It definitely has. I don't want to say that we anticipated it happening, because I think that would be misconstruing what we've done, but we've always understood that data is the important piece. The application is just a way to access that information. And over time, I've seen plenty of trends in application development over my 15-year or so career where, it's gotten easier to interact with data. You can see more of it on the thing. You can stream it from your database instead of trying to access it one by one. So things got easier over time. So these LLMs, I think, are just another way to access that information. They're a fantastic search tool. That's the way I look at them. So I do think it's going to make a pretty big impact in terms of how you access and specifically how you navigate or interact with that data. But it's not going to predict the future, because at the end of the day, it's the same underlying architecture. It's generalizing really well. So it's not predicting on things it's never seen before. We haven't quite hit that level of intelligence just yet. Yeah.
And considering we are almost on an exponential development arc now with new applications, with especially the power of these applications relating to the data they're being fed, basically also multiplying exponentially.
Yep.
Where do you think is that inflection point for the aquaculture industry where things suddenly start becoming extremely useful? Like, what's the network effect we need to achieve?
It varies, I think, species and region.
For salmon, for instance.
I'll stick to salmon specifically. I think what I see in the salmon industry is there's certainly enough data there to start really distilling insights. I mean, we've done some work in deep analysis, maybe is the right way to put it, where you're looking at really granular things. So if I want to understand how one very specific thing, whether that's EPA or DHA like we did with Moritz, or if it's a very specific vaccine strain that was deployed in the field, how did that perform? Why did it perform the way it did? And not only that, but when you're doing that analysis, isolating for all of the similar conditions, there's certainly enough data in the salmon industry to be doing that already. Isolating for similarities is 100% in the realm of possibilities, and we are actively doing it today in many of our models and benchmarks that are out there. Yeah.
And on the level of formulation, nutrients, ingredients, considering also a company like dsm-firmenich, producing and bringing these high quality ingredients into the salmon value chain and into the farms, is there something you can offer the farmers to help, or the feed companies to help with that formulation, that integration, and also the measurement of the impact of the ingredients during the grow out?
Yeah. I think that's something that the industry could really work on, is how they manage the ingredients themselves. When you're talking to these feed companies, whether it's Cargill, or if it's Alltech, or if it's Skredding or BMR, all of them kind of keep some of those ingredients lock and key, so it's a little hard to get. So what happens is the farms become the arbiter of truth. They're the ones who manage what they've ordered with their batches of feed. The thing is the actual management of that data, it's kind of sitting in a bunch of distributed systems all over the place. Some of them is PDFs, some of them are sitting probably on their desk in a folder. So in order to analyze stuff, it has to be digitized, or it has to be found. So I think there's a very strong possibility of it happening, and you can certainly do it because we have all of the field data that's necessary, right? Everything going on the farms from day zero, or even before they even enter into the sea phase, all the way until when they're harvested and processed at the facilities. So correlating that stuff is 100% possible. It's just a matter of, can we get the baseline data we need in order to actually do it? And you've seen that happen in some of the other aspects of the industry. So,
how would you get the baseline data?
A lot of it's just record management, to be honest. And going outside of the Norwegian industry, I have heard of other industries that actually do track this data a lot more meticulously. Why there's that disparity, I don't quite know, but I do think that there's a pretty simple way of resolving it. And really, when your feed comes in, just make sure you're recording it in one manner in some sort of unified place. This way it can be picked up to do this kind of stuff. So, yeah. It's not that it's impossible. I think it just takes a little more legwork to get done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you see as the biggest fields or areas still in the industry, also specifically in salmon for now, where technology could still alleviate a lot of pain points where we haven't quite penetrated?
Oh, there's a very futuristic kind of where I would love to see us go, and then there's, I think, a more realistic toned down version. So I'll start there with the more.
Start with the stepping stone.
Yeah, the stepping stone is right now all this data, all of these lab tests, all of these problems that we encounter along the way. The same question comes up whether we're talking about complex gill disease, or if we're talking about an upwelling event or some sort of deprivation of oxygen. There's always I don't quite know why it happened. And the fun thing is that because there's so much data collection happening, you can actually run really complex root cause analysis across, we're talking 20,000, 30,000 types of measurements that we have in our system. And you're able to correlate, sometimes really minute details, like a specific type of feed that you used at the time, or you have an increase in spinal deformities, and it was actually correlated to a specific vaccine that you take. So this kind of stuff is 100% possible and can be done today. The future, where I really would like to see us go, is now that we have all these different sensing systems and cameras that are collecting data minute by minute, right, second by second, that same analysis of doing root cause analysis, imagine doing it in real time, where you're taking all of the unique patterns of these populations of fish, and you are correlating them to all of the specific things that happened historically. And then as you're going through, you're getting early warnings of things that are going to occur because of the indicators within the data that it's generalizing off of. And that's becoming more of a reality or a possibility because of the frequency that that data is coming in, which we really haven't seen up until maybe 2 years ago. So that's the piece that kind of I like to nerd out on quite a bit.
Okay, yeah. And this is all about salmon mainly, right? So the question really is, because there are a lot more species out there, and there is also always the big question around shrimp, right?
Yeah.
So how does shrimp become the same technologized industry that salmon has achieved to become? How transferable are these learnings and this is technology between species?
Yeah, I think on paper it's very easy. Like if I want to go over to, let's say, shrimp, or we can do sea bream because we're here in Greece. It's a matter of taking the growth of the fish, putting it in the system, and then seeing if the baselines are different or dramatically different than what we see in the species that we already have in the system. It's like creating a new PCR test. We're just going to run thousands of samples until we find our baselines or our bounds. I think where the hard part is when it comes to the data that's being collected. Like, is it enough? I don't know how it is now, but I remember 5 years ago we were looking at shrimp, and what we heard was shrimp go in the water, and we don't know what the mortality rates until we really take them out. That's when we determine what the survival rate of that population is. And to me, that means that either you're going to have to model the entire production of that specific pond of shrimp, or we have to come up with some sort of unique monitoring solution to make that happen. So I think that's where the complications come in, especially when you're looking at the crustaceans like shrimp. So, yeah.
There was a point on the panel this morning around cost of technology and potentially these technologies, what you and others, technology companies offer in aquaculture, not being applicable to other species than salmon, purely due to the market prices, to the cost structure of these businesses. Someone said that this would alleviate over time due to the price of hardware falling. However, if I look at the development, how it's been, how can we be sure that we don't stop at the point where the hardware producer and the chip producer and everybody else takes their margin, and even though the price might be falling at the chip production facility, these margins just keep growing, and the price actually never drops to that point, where a commodity product like bass, bream, etc., shrimp in small scale could benefit from this. How can this be alleviated for small scale farmers? Because we need to bring them on board.
Yeah, no, I agree with that entirely, and honestly, it's not the easiest question to answer, right? I mean, we've almost explicitly avoided hardware as a whole because the cost of producing and managing that hardware is quite expensive. So in order to keep costs down, in order to keep the team size relatively small, we stuck with software. We think that there's enough monitoring going on these farms to at least get started somewhere. So, I mean, maybe there's a reduction in they build a separate camera system or sensor that's a little bit cheaper. Maybe it does a little bit less, but it's enough for that industry. But the other side is when you have these farms or industries like salmon where they're making so much money, you can sometimes subsidize a portion because there is interesting data that comes from the other species that can correlate back to salmon. So there is a way for the whole system to kind of benefit from each other, but it does take a little bit of finagling to get there, I think. So it's not the smoothest path. The other side of me is really, there should be some incentives, because in order for industries outside of these well-established ones to grow, we need to reduce risk. And part of that is, one, understanding exactly what's going on. So we can't be, forging numbers because it looks better. It's not beneficial to the farm in the long run to do so. Maybe it is now, but if you have enough technology to where you're able to monitor it and then predict your risk or understand it, there's more of an incentive for you to be more correct with that recording. The other piece is when you stabilize your risk or have a good understanding of what that risk is expected to be, then you can get insurers and financiers to come in, and that in itself will also help stabilize the industry, because then all of a sudden there's a risk, it's calculated, and it's understood. So it's not quite an answer to the how do you solve the hardware problem, but I do think that there is a natural progression to get there to make these industries more technologically inclined or higher adoption rates for some of the stuff that we're creating.
Is there any level of education incentive for farmers that they can learn how to get their farm technology ready?
That's a good question. I think it's almost more like business related. I mean, I met some intelligent people that never had a lick of school beyond high school or didn't even finish high school, right? My grandfather is like this. The guy's a wizard in math and never actually went to school. It's incredible what he can do because it became a necessity, right? He started a business, he sold flowers to restaurants and to hotels in New York, and he had to calculate, how he was going to do his taxes, and it became a necessity to become very proficient at math. And I think that many of the farmers are like that too. You don't need to have formal education and technology to understand that maybe something might help you, right? But it shouldn't be assessed of there's a new cool technology that's an LLM or the fancy, a new camera, or even for us, like a new AI system that's supposed to calculate all of the problems. Understand are you at a point in your business to where it makes sense to invest in these kind of technologies? Do you need to micro-tune your ingredients and feed? Do you need to decide what actions are going to help you, specific treatments? Do you even have options on the treatments that you're doing, or do you only have one or two at your disposal? So I think when they're coming in, they're assessing technology. I don't know if there needs to be like an education process, but it needs to be thought about that technology is a tool. It doesn't solve the problem. It's a tool to help you assess the best solution to that problem, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. To wrap up, what can a farmer do? Like 3 things a farm can do to help them get closer to transparency. What you mentioned this morning was basically the essence of the first step of getting things done. To know where we're going, we need to know where we are.
Yeah.
So 3 things a farm can do just to make sure everything's under control and they're ready to maybe engage with a company like yours or others in the space to gain all the efficiencies they can gain in their operation.
Yeah, I mean, it's the basic, most vital step, I think, is just start collecting. Like, just start recording what's going on if you're not doing so. And maybe it's naive, but I think most farmers are probably collecting data to some extent. But collect the things that are important to you. Like, you don't have to have every single thing going on in your farm recorded, but know what your mortalities are. Put in at least a general idea of what's going on when it comes to, losing fish, losing shrimp, losing your stock. And make sure that you're recording, when the fish went in the water and when they came out and at what sizes. I think it's the very basic step 1. Step 2, start trying to understand how to use Excel or investing in a team that has a little bit of experience with some of the Excel products or some of just basic data analysis. And then at some point, you're going to hit a limitation. And when you hit that limitation, then reach out to the technology providers like us, right? Don't just make the leap from not having any data infrastructure to just buying whatever is available, because then what's gonna run into is this conundrum of purchasing something that essentially doesn't solve your problem for you. Because on paper, we all say these really great claims, right? But we're all doing very specific things. Like, you're not going to buy Manolin if you're trying to see your fish underneath the water. That's not what we do. But on paper, it looks like we do a lot of this stuff because we are all doing artificial intelligence and complex things. So it's really, I think, more of a pragmatic approach to adopting technology rather than this necessity or this need to do it. And maybe that's counterintuitive as a technology business owner, but I like to keep things a little bit more realistic because it's not for everybody. It's not necessary in every single case to have these super high-tech solutions. But when you get there, we're here and we're ready and we're willing to take that on. So, yeah.
Third step?
Yeah, that's it.
No third step, just
those are
basically,
Yeah, it's just a bit of a waterfall, in my opinion.
Yeah. So it's about knowing what your problem is and understanding what tool can solve it.
Yep.
And technology is a tool, but it's not a solution.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, Moritz.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next time.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah.